episode of the Listening Detective TV, and we're in the episode, no we're not, we're actually season 3, and this is episode 3, and we're talking about confidence this time round. And I'm very lucky to have the lovely Sarah Bradley from Apricot Lane Coaching with me, so thanks for joining me today, Sarah.
Pleasure, nice to see you.
And those of you watched our show before, you know that we basically take a word and we get curious about what it means to us, and compare and contrast our different perceptions and experience of those words. And this month is confidence, and the title of this episode is Confidence to be Childless, because Sarah, you've been on that journey yourself, haven't you, where you've thought your life was going in one direction, and then it was taken off another way, and so we're going to find out about that a bit later on. But before we get into that, let's just tell me a little bit, for you, Sarah, confidence is like what?
Confidence is like, when I think I'm being confident, I have an image of myself kind of sort of marching strongly onwards in a straight line, and knowing exactly where I'm going and what I'm doing. That's my image of confidence, and that doesn't mean it comes from the same place every time, but that's the sort of image that I feel when I hear the word confident.
So it's marching and it's in a straight line. Is there anything else about the straight line?
No, I guess now you've asked me, I hadn't thought about that before. It's a road, and it's a road sort of going across an open air space. So yeah, it's me marching through a big open space.
So when that's you marching, and you say it can come from different places, where does your confidence to sort of march in open space like that come from?
Okay, I had to think about this one because I knew I was going to be doing this. So the obvious one is I'm confident when I feel like I know what I'm doing and I know where I'm going and everything's very sure and clear. But I'm also confident, I think, when I know that I can try something and it's okay if it goes wrong, or if it doesn't work out. I've got the confidence to be able to do that. That's another type of confidence. Or there's the type of confidence that comes from knowing that I can learn how to do something, or that I can find out how to do it, and I feel confident in those situations as well. So
have you always been confident like that?
If you'd asked me 20 years ago, I probably would have said yes, but I think I'm more confident now than I ever have been. I've never felt like I wasn't confident, but I think that's because I didn't really know whether I was or not. I never thought about it. Whereas now I know when I'm confident and when I'm not.
So I think we might get an echo on this. I hope it's okay. I've just got some feedback in my ears then. So the question one that maybe it's about you knowing that you can learn, but of course you're also a teacher, aren't you, as well, by trade. So you've also got this passion for learning, because I wonder if my sort of sense is that people lose confidence when they don't know how to do something, but if they've lost their confidence in their ability to learn new things, because confidence comes from either familiarity, as you just said, or our ability to learn things. So do you think your training as a teacher has given you more tools for learning, or was it a passion or learning that got you into teaching in the first place? Is it one of those sort of...
I think when I look back, I always knew I was going to be a teacher. I've actually got a little drawing that my mum saved and photocopied for me that I did when I was about 6, that says when I grow up I'm going to be a teacher. So that was always a very clear decision, which I never actually wavered from for more than about 5 minutes. My mum was a teacher as well, so I think I sort of was confident I knew about teaching and how it worked. I have always loved learning. I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to learning. I've always read loads. I was constantly had my head in a book as a kid. We used to go places and do things. A lot of my confidence comes from my childhood. Which is pure luck, isn't it, really? That bit of it is pure luck as to what family you're born into. And that reliability of my childhood has given me a lot of confidence. With the teaching, I suppose I went into it never doubting that this is what I was going to do and that I would be a good teacher.
Fabulous. So that brings on to the other question. What's likely to knock your confidence?
Mm. Okay, so I had a big confidence crisis about 4 years ago, when everything just went to bits around me and confidence was sort of at floor level. And what happened there was, and again, I didn't realize it at the time, but I know now when I look back and analyze it a little bit, I'd lost clarity. I had no clarity of what I was doing, what was going on around me, and what decisions I was making. I had no clarity in what my life was all about. And also I'd gone through a lot of losses and felt quite isolated. So I think a lack of clarity and a feeling of isolation is what knocks my confidence.
Yeah, so a lack of clarity, and we're going to come on to that a bit more with your story in a minute, because you're going to talk about that, because I'm fairly sure from our conversations beforehand there's a correlation as to why you lost your clarity. So there's isolation and a lack of clarity. So when you find yourself, even if it's for moments rather than like when you say you're right on the floor on that particular thing 4 years ago, what were your strategies to get you back to this space of confidence? What worked for you?
If I sort of talk about now, because I'm sort of aware now when I've lost confidence, because I know my confidence comes from connection and knowing I can learn and knowing how I can find out how to do things. I can consciously do that. So I said earlier that how lucky I was to be born into a family where I had a nice childhood, and I do appreciate that luck. But I also know that I've worked at relationships, worked at things. So, these days I consciously connect with people who I know will give me love and support, people who I can learn from, people who are genuinely sort of looking out for my interests. So that gives me a lot of confidence, the fact that I've worked at relationships and I've got a lot of people who've got my back, if you like, in many different ways. Go on, you were going to say something?
Well, I'm just wondering, you sound like you're happy to ask for help, and I wonder if that is partly that's if you've had a really great childhood and there's been the support there early on. Do you find it easy to ask for help?
I do. Yeah, in most situations I think I do, and I see it as part of my learning, that if I don't know something or I don't know how to do something, then I'd probably know someone who does. And why not connect with them and have that as part of my learning? So yeah, I am a very independent person. I live by myself, have done for a long time. So when life throws stuff at you, I have to deal with it, just silly things like the broken washing machine or whatever. But I appreciate that my independence comes from the strength of knowing that there are people who I can ask for help when I need it.
Yeah, that came up from episode 2 with Karen and Sam. They talked about sometimes there's people there that you don't really talk to them, you don't even go to them for anything, but just because you know they're there, you can find the inner strength, because that support can sometimes just being in the knowing you're not on your own, rather than the actual physically having to do something. So tell us a little bit about your story, because today's subject's about confidence to be childless. And obviously I'm just wondering if you have a picture of you at 6 that you're going to be a teacher. I'm wondering if you also had this picture of yourself going to be a mum and having children, and obviously life didn't deal you that hand. So tell us a little bit about perhaps even your childhood vision for that, and what happened for you.
I mean, I grew up, when I say I had a very happy childhood, I grew up in a family of 4, totally secure, very supportive parents, lots of boundaries, all the sort of things that that children need to grow up feeling safe and secure, extended family. So I didn't even think about it. I knew that when I grew up I would also have kids and have that family, and my parents would be great grandparents, and my sister's kids would have cousins, and it wasn't something I consciously thought about. You just knew that's what was going to happen, and it didn't, and that's a huge thing to deal with. It was, and it took me a long time to realise that that's the situation I was in. And when I found out I was, it had a really big impact. Really big impact.
And is that one of the losses, or is that the main loss that you're talking about when you talk about losses? Because it's
yeah, well, the childlessness sort of came from, there was no particular reason. One of the big things is that you hear a lot about people going through IVF and fertility treatment and not being able to have children. The vast majority of women who are childless, not by choice, it's just through circumstance. You know, the relationship didn't happen, the timing wasn't right, they were too wrapped up in career or whatever. But so there was no reason fertility wise, but I was in a relationship that didn't work out at the time when I would have had kids. And then time just kind of drifted away and the relationship didn't happen. I could have maybe, gone out and had a kid by other means, but that's not what I chose to do. So yeah, that was the circumstance I found myself in, but I didn't realise the impact it had had on me until about 10 years later. I knew it was sad. I knew I was disappointed I hadn't had kids, but I was just kind of getting on with life, and life was okay. And, I was confident, I thought, and busy. But then 10 years later, I had some time off of work with stress-related illness. And through counselling and a lot of reflection, I ended up, I made myself a list of all the things that had kind of gone wrong in the last 3 years, I think it was at the time, and there'd been 2 relationship breakdowns, a bereavement, family bereavement. Because I was off work, my career was sort of up in the air. I identified myself as a teacher, and suddenly I couldn't do that anymore. It wasn't working out. And when you talk about loss with childlessness, it's the loss of the future you thought you had. And it's not just in that moment where I didn't have a baby. I would never have kids who had a first day at school. I would never have family Christmas parties where my kids played with their cousins. I would never have a child going off to university. I would never have my child getting married. I'd never be a grandparent. And that's the loss. It's not the immediate impact of not having a baby to hold. It's that, oh my God, my whole future is gone. It's not what I'm planning. So that was the loss, along with all those other things, and the death of a pet who I'd had for many years. And I just felt very, very sorry for myself. And at the time I was beating myself up for that and indulging in self-pity, and I thought that was wrong. But then I suddenly realised that I wasn't okay, and that wasn't my fault, and that I was dealing with a hell of a lot, actually, and it's no wonder everything had fallen to pieces. So at that point, my confidence just wasn't there at all, really. I was functioning, I was getting from day to day. But the one thing that stands out for me is the time I realised I was actually ill with it was when I was off work. A rose bush blew down in the garden. I love my little garden. I love pottering around out there. A rose bush fell down, and it was the end of the world. I cried and I raged, and I didn't know what to do. And then it sounds funny, but at the time, that's when I realised it's a rose bush, but it was a last straw. And that's
I'm smiling because I think that all our viewers, if you're watching this, I think when we lose our confidence, we do become irrational and irritable and intolerant and frustrated, like just because the cake was burnt a bit too brown. And so they're your warning signs, guys. If you start listening to your system, if you're getting irritable and irrational about stuff, there's usually a build-up of things, isn't there, that we haven't paid attention to. And what it sounds like for yourself is that this is an unconscious assumption that you will be a mother, and therefore there's all these things. And it's not until perhaps your sister gets married, has a child, and starts going through them, each time those things happen, I guess you're getting feedback of what you're not going to have, and a reminder, whereas perhaps you hadn't consciously, even when you didn't have the children, you're not really consciously aware of that. And I'm sorry for the men that might be watching this, but I'm a mother of a blended family of 5, and I've got 2 children of my own, and I had the reverse story. I was told I couldn't have children from quite a young age, So kind of set myself up, I wasn't going to have them, and then suddenly found myself with them and had to sort of like rejig. But when I went through the menopause and I knew I could no longer have any more, I remember feeling quite bereft. That because it was like I now have no choice. You know, before it was a choice I was making, whereas actually that choice has been taken away from me. Now my time is up. And so I can kind of relate to or imagine some of those things that go on. But I know one of the things that we talk about confidence is step by step listening is that it's the feedback you get. And I know that one of the things you're really keen to do is support other women now, because in your words, society is set up with the assumption everyone's going to have children, and it's very, you use family focused language, it's family included of everything else. And so when you are grieving that loss, even unconsciously getting upset about rose bushes because you know, you don't realize it, you think you're taking it in stride, you think you're okay, you think you're all right, you get these things, don't you, that come along, and suddenly unconsciously or consciously you've got constant reminders of what you haven't got. So I know that you have a very exciting program coming up, but what happens between that kind of that first thing when you realize you're not okay and building back up to getting that confidence back? What's the first thing that happens, do you think, or can you, in your sort of what you talk to your women about, what's the first thing that has to happen?
The big shift for me was saying it out loud, and I said it out loud to a counsellor who was life-changing for me. She was amazing, and realising I needed to grieve, that it was a loss. Not being able to have children was a loss, just as much as many other losses. It was a bereavement. So I had lots of counselling. I grieved. I consciously grieved at the suggestion of my counsellor. Every day I set some time aside to grieve, to think about the children I would have had, and lots of other things. And for about 2 months I consciously grieved every day, and it was exhausting. But at the end of that, I posted on Facebook, on the World Childless Week site, I posted that I was childless and I was struggling, and that was the first time I'd told anybody other than my counsellor what I was feeling. My best friend, my sister, my mum, I told nobody, because I know now I was terrified of self-pity. And I thought people would pity me if I admitted to being sad, whereas actually it was all self-pity. Nobody felt sorry for me apart from me, and that was a really unusual feeling for me, having to feel sorry for myself. It went along with shame and guilt that I'd failed. I hated my body. My body had failed me. Wasn't a coincidence. It was at the same sort of time around menopause. So it was all those really, really difficult feelings that we try and bury all the time. And actually, once I'd let those go, just through saying it out loud, I already felt so much lighter. And suddenly I became an advocate for people who don't have children, and the way we're excluded from so many things, and the way society kind of just ignores the issue. We're not acknowledged, etc., etc. I could rant on for ages about that, and I won't. But yeah, it's that initial acknowledging that this was a real loss, and it wasn't my fault. That was the difference.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, I say it in my book, the sort of thing is sometimes we don't reach out for that kind of help until we've reached crisis points. So either, you know, we can't cope at work, or we're in floods of tears because a rose bush is being knocked over, or, you know, and sometimes we do that for quite a long time in private before we reach out and do something. And so I know that one of the words, because you and I have talked about this before, is that you recognise that to go from that you can be very isolated and alone, but at least it's private. And it's only you that knows about it. and it can feel very shameful, and you can feel shame or for feeling so sorry for yourself, especially if you're a very confident, capable, driven person. We've been raised, we get raised, don't we, to be that positivity is important. So if there's nothing else to say to you when you're going through change, every change in life has a loss of some sort. This is obviously a massive one with lots of repeated feedback through life cycles and society. And so it's what's the word? Oh, I can't think of the word now, but it's kind of made worse by the repetition and the expanse of the feedback around you all the time. I can imagine watching movies and everything is going to have that. You're going to constantly have feedback, aren't you, about what you don't have. But I think that the word that you've used is to encourage people, or you want to reach people who say, actually, I want to be braver. This isn't about, I am confident, I am capable, I'm a determined person, but actually I want to be brave, and I want to face this now, and I want to be able to become the person I am fully as a childless person, and own that as an identity rather than feeling like there's something wrong with it. So we have got a few minutes before we can get to the end of it. So I'm going to test you now, whether I didn't tell you I was going to do this bit, because I know you've got this fantastic program starting.
I have, yes.
And beginning of February, is it?
I'm going to launch it in about a week or so's time, and then it will start in the middle of February. Yeah.
Start in the middle of February. So a good month for loving yourself. If you are out there and you are childless, and maybe you've just sort of kind of got to that point where you're recognizing it may not be happening for you, or maybe you're years down the line and you've been struggling with this and trying to get on, and maybe this is your time to stop and have someone that you can talk to and be in a community of other people who are on that journey with you. So can we remember what all the letters stand for brave? So the first week you're going to be looking at is what does the B stand for in your brave program?
Begin to believe.
To believe.
Beginning just to recognize that you believe you can move on from being a childless person to a different sort of life, even though it wasn't what you expected. So,
or what you want, isn't it? I think that during the pandemic, when we're airing this now, is none of us really want the life we've got right now. And so I'd imagine that these things we're going to talk about now, anyone that's out there who's got something they don't want, you have to decide, don't you, to go, okay, well, I can't have what I really want, but given I can't have it, what would I like to have happen? And therefore the sound like your first step is just start to begin to believe that you can think about an alternative, what's the word you'd use?
It's an alternative, alternative purpose, alternative way of approaching life. Because to suddenly have the rug pulled out of everything you expected to happen for the rest of your life, you do have to begin to believe that you can do something different, and also that you can be happy, and be in a good place again, because you feel like you're not going to be ever. Yeah.
And I know I've talked to you and other people who've gone through this childlessness. It's also about being happy for other people having children as well, because it can really put a bit of a wedge between relationships. When you're trying to suppress your own sadness, then you can become resentful, can't you, of other people's joy. So it's actually, so the B is for beginning to believe, and the R stands for
reset your reality.
Fabulous.
So the basic coaching always starts with reality. Where are you right now? And as a childless woman, you might feel that right now your reality isn't the one you wanted, but you can't sort of see the way out of that. So R for resetting your reality is just a tiny shift, maybe, to work out what's okay, what's not okay, and this is real, this is where I actually am, and I need to know where I am before I can move forwards.
Fab. And that takes them to A, which is, what does that stand for?
A is adventure.
Oh,
see, now it gets exciting.
And I've talked to you about this before, but I was already in the acceptance, because I was just making an assumption. So I have to say, the minute you mention adventure and you light up, I mean, that just sounds like, just by putting that kind of energy, that kind of word, it just actually, in fact, there's a question I've heard is, what does this make possible? isn't it? That's kind of where you're going. So what is it about adventure that's important to you for your ladies on your program to experience?
Adventure's exciting, isn't it? Whatever it might be. It can be a little adventure or a big adventure. The adventure for me was changing my career, adapting my career, trying something new, becoming a coach. That was my adventure, and it was exciting and still is. I'm still excited about that. So an adventure can be a huge life-changing thing, like it was for me. Or it might just be a little adventure. It might be, we can't do it at the moment, can we? It might be a weekend away, but it will be for everybody who's involved in the Brave program to decide what they want their adventure to be. Short-term, long-term, rest of their lives, the next 10 minutes, whatever it might be. But adventure is that point you reach where, okay, this is my reality, but I can go on an adventure.
What I love about you, Sarah, is I know this is going to be a 6-week program, but even just as you're talking there, you can hear how gentle and encouraging, and it's going to be okay for people to do it at their pace.
Oh, absolutely.
This is not a push. You've got to get through it.
No.
Brave isn't about jumping out of aeroplanes or going on hot coals. It's about taking small steps or making a slight shift in the way you're thinking about something. Put your attention on something different. And so it's lovely to hear that you've got this flexibility that they can be as adventurous. And for some people, just a small thing is quite a big adventure for them to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
sorry, I was going to bring it back to your confidence bit then. Setting yourself up for an adventure, it requires confidence. So I'm really hoping that a big part of the program will be just building in small steps that confidence that is likely to have been knocked, and putting that towards an adventure. So I'm hoping each stage the confidence will build.
And like all these coaching programs, we work with lovely people, and then they bring their stuff, and then usually you co-create, don't you, the solution with them, because you find out as they speak what they actually need. So the V stands for
vulnerability. That's a scary one, isn't it?
So what does that mean?
Just exploring vulnerability, because it's something I was never very good at acknowledging. I've mentioned shame and guilt and a sense of failure, and they were never things that I thought applied to me. I was in complete denial of that. And to actually say, particularly shame, it's not a word I like, but to say that out loud, to go to counselling, to tell my friends what had happened to me and how it had impacted me, to come out on Facebook. I had to make myself vulnerable, and I was terrified that people would pity me, people would trivialize it, people would not think it was a big deal. So that was the scary bit, was making myself vulnerable. Now, my vulnerabilities might not be the same as other people's, but the fact that I recognize them and I can now say them out loud confidently has made a big effect on how I've sort of recovered and moved forwards. So having a session on the program where vulnerabilities are looked at is hopefully going to be getting through some barriers to help you go on your adventure.
Fabulous. And I think the other thing to remember is this is a small group, isn't it? You're talking about having 5 or 6 people on this group, so it's
six maximum.
You're going to be building relationships over a few weeks. And like all the other bits, there's a little bit of having go. I mean, I've been doing personal development for 30 years, really intensely for the last 12. And it was only before, during lockdown, that for me, there was some stuff I realised around shame, that something had happened that I had never spoken about. And having that space where you can just sort of express yourself without judgment and just have your thoughts witnessed without trying to fix them or change them or anything, just having them held, like the counselling kind of listening does for us, is so empowering, because we make up all sorts of stories in our head of what might happen when we say it out loud, and then when you do it and then really nothing really happens, because the people that are with you have got the ability to listen, and they have got the ability to empathise and to hold that space. It is absolute transformation. So I know it's going to be magic happening.
The other reason for having a group is that it's a lonely place, or you think it's a lonely place, being childless. It sometimes seems like everyone around you has got kids or grandchildren, or their lives revolve around their families. But once I'd come clean about it all and recognised it, there's a lot of us out there. In fact, it's 1 in 5 over 40s don't have children, most of them not by choice. So the idea of having a group is to make people feel less alone, basically.
Definitely. I mean, that's something I talk about all the time in terms of coaching. You can one-to-one sometimes is really lovely, and maybe it's the first step, but there's something magical that happens when you can share that experience with it. There's a sense of connection and a belonging. And I remember saying to my clients years ago that, I wouldn't have a business if it was just you. I'd really be broke, honestly. I wouldn't have customers coming in. And then when we brought a group of people together and they started hearing people talking about similar challenges with managing themselves and their time and stuff, you could just feel this sort of like relief. It's like, oh, thank goodness for that. It's not just me. It's just like the relief that it can give your system to just feel like it just takes all that pressure off, that you're the only one that's been thinking these things. And it's sad because most of us go through similar things, but it's only when we can actually physically hear it from somebody else and witness it for ourselves that our own system seems to truly believe it. So I know it's going to be magical. So to wrap up, the final week is E. So what does that stand for?
E is going to be all about expressing and exploring what's happened to you over the time of the course, how your adventure's going, and being able to express that out loud and say how things are changing, where you feel you're going now, and just looking on to what's next, and exploring ideas about how doing the program has impacted longer term. Where are you going with it? So expressing and exploring what's next.
Fabulous. And I seem to remember, didn't you add in the 6th one that's going to be R, where they're going to be rejoicing what's happened? So they're going to have some celebrations as well. Because it's absolutely going to have some.
I'm not quite sure yet, but R can be lots of things. It can be reflecting, rejoicing, reviewing, all those V things. So yes, the braver bit of the program will come together, and that'll be a chance to look at what we've achieved and celebrate. So that sounds such a cliche, but that's what it is.
I hope you're getting that echo that I'm getting.
No.
That's all right then. Well, you say about the cliches about if this is coming out now in the middle of our 3rd lockdown in the UK. If there's anything that you're struggling with, celebrating who you are, what is working, what's okay in your life is so important, because we do so much. I often talk in my sessions like we'll have a good old whinge, we'll get our face, something, our body involved, and we'll whinge about it, we'll talk about it, and we'll get every muscle in our body involved with the grumping about what's not okay. But we don't spend enough time, because it's almost like once we've achieved something, we're it's a relief. And we get on to the next problem we've got to solve, and the next problem we've got to solve, or we talk about the problems we haven't solved yet. But either way, you give these problems so much attention that I think that it's really important in terms of confidence as well, whether it's childlessness or anything else, that people stop and recognise what has happened and what's changed, no matter how small that progress is, and that they take time to celebrate it. Now, celebrating like me and you might be that we go yeah, or dancing, but equally I've got a lady at the moment who, for her, a celebration is like it's the honouring of it, it's the witnessing of it, and giving your own stopping long enough or doing something so that your system actually remembers it. Otherwise it gets lost in the pile of things you're trying to work out and sort out. Well, we will be putting the link in the description below in the YouTube channel. So if you want to find out more about Sarah's Brave or Braver program, and you are childless and you're ready to change the direction and your thinking and the way that life has dealt your cards, then this is the lady to talk to. So please check out the link below. It will be there for you to find out more and how to connect with Sarah online in Facebook. So thank you, Sarah, for joining me today. It's been absolutely
having
gorgeous.
Me.
And I hope we'll get lots of comments from our viewers telling us what they've learnt from our chat.
Yes.
And hopefully they'll find ways of being more confident and brave. thing I'm going to take away from it is adventure. Because I have to say, when you said that word, it really resonated. I thought, oh, I could do with a bit of adventure. So that's what I'm going to take away from today. So thank you very much, Sarah.
Good, that's brilliant. Thank you, Cheryl.